The first part of the lecture today, I'm going to talk about social science paradigms. I'll be reading the first chapter of the text this week. Parts of this lecture will be found within that chapter on general research questions. A paradigm is a foundational frame of reference. We don't often think about the paradigms in which we live or the paradigms in which we conduct our day-to-day lives. They're often implicit and we take them for granted until we actually start reflecting on them and talking about them. And so I want you to think about the paradigm of progress in which most social discourse takes place nowadays. And so if you were to listen to media reports or listen to politicians talk about the state of our country or our province or our city, often they'll talk within a paradigm of progress. So things are getting better. Their lifestyles are improving. The city is growing. The province's economy is moving forward. And so there's this notion of progress, particularly in capitalist societies. And this paradigm sort of assumes that growth is good. And so there's a growth in production, increase in incomes, our quality of life is improving. And so there's this kind of trajectory moving forward that somehow progress is good and things are moving forward. And so this is a particular paradigm which is often used in popular discourse today in Western societies, particularly in capitalist societies. We become more aware that that paradigm is functioning or foundational to much of the discourse when you start to listen to the paradigm that other people are using, a paradigm which I refer to as sustainability here. And this often comes out of discourse associated with the environmental movement. And this paradigm posits that our resources and that our life is within a fixed kind of system. And so things are limited. And some resources are renewable, many are not. And so that we have to live within a paradigm of sustainability, that we have to limit our use of the resources. We have to share them more equitably, and we have to take care that our lifestyle is sustainable. And so these are two kind of competing paradigms within popular discourse nowadays. And they have very, very different foundations. They compete. They don't really mesh together very well. And so this gives us an understanding that paradigms are foundational kinds of ways of thinking about the world or thinking about reality that govern our discourse. I have here several scientific paradigms that may be familiar to you, particularly in the natural sciences. And so one of them is Newtonian physics. Many of us learned about this in school, that there are certain laws of nature. Another scientific paradigm is Einstein's theory of relativity. And in fact, Einstein's theory challenged the accepted Newtonian theories of the way the world works or that natural science operates. And so instead of these fixed laws, that these the way that reality is relative, so that the subject position, in fact, impacts what one understands or what one is able to observe about physical reality. Another scientific paradigm is Darwin's theory of evolution. And Darwin's theory of evolution was a huge challenge to people when it came along initially, that all of life is in a process of evolution. And this is still a popular debate in some circles. In the United States, there is a continual conflict between those who embrace Darwin's theory of evolution or a scientific paradigm of evolution, and those that would argue for creationism or what they call intelligent design. And so those are scientific paradigms that are competing against one another, and they are in conflict. Another example of a scientific paradigm is that of Copernicus, who introduced the understanding that perhaps the Earth was not the center of the universe, but in fact revolved around the sun. And this was a huge challenge at the time to general understandings of how reality worked. So scientific paradigms usually are kind of entrenched. People think that, okay, this is the way things are. And then someone introduces a new way of understanding the natural world and challenges older scientific paradigms. And so what happens is we see paradigm shifts that occur. And old paradigms are challenged and sometimes replaced by new ones. In the social sciences, there are also shifts in theoretical paradigms or ways that we understand social life, but they're somewhat less revolutionary. They don't seem to, or they don't tend to be completely supplanted like they are in the natural sciences. They're somewhat less revolutionary, but nevertheless, there are debates that go on between people who take on different social scientific paradigms. So social scientific paradigms are different ways of understanding human social life. And each paradigm has a fundamental set of assumptions about the nature of social reality. And it's not that one paradigm is, false or another one is true, but they are more or less useful to the people who use them in approaching their social scientific research. So I'm going to go through a few of them. The first is the positivist paradigm, and this is often associated with the early sociological researchers or sociologists. Auguste Comte was a philosopher, and he wasn't necessarily a sociologist, but we put him as sort of one of the fathers of sociology in the early 1800s. We have to understand that, the Enlightenment was a time when religious paradigms were challenged by philosophical paradigms, that in a sense logic was posited as more reliable than belief. Okay, that a better way to understand reality was to think about it logically as opposed to thinking about it religiously. And so the Enlightenment really is a challenge to religious ways of thinking. Modernity, in which we really start to understand sociology as a development of modernity. So in modernity, these older philosophical paradigms are being challenged by modern paradigms or positivist paradigms. And these paradigms are based on empirical observation so that we can better understand social life by actually observing what people do. And people aren't necessarily always logical in their actions. And so early sociology posits that the best way to understand social life is through empirical observation, okay? So that we can objectively understand social life by observing it. Another social scientific paradigm that's being introduced around the same time is that of conflict. So Karl Marx is one of the people associated with this paradigm, and he argues that social behavior can best be understood as a process of conflict. And in his case, this was conflict between economic classes, and so that the working class was in conflict with the capitalist class. There are other focuses of conflict paradigms. One could focus on conflicts between genders. Another focus of conflict might be either race or ethnicity, between organizations, between departments at a university. There's lots of ways of describing the different kinds of social conflicts that occur. And they occur not in only in overarching ways, but also in more micro kinds of ways. So social groups have conflicting interests. And so the best way to understand society is to look at these conflicts between different social groups. Another paradigm is the interactionist paradigm, and this is often associated with somebody by the name of Georg Simmel. And these social researchers are interested in social interactions between individuals in smaller groups. So we're not looking at large sort of societal kinds of interactions, but much more micro interactions. Other sociologists associated with this are George Herbert Mead and his school of what we call symbolic interactionists. And so Mead posited that we are socialized to take on the role of the generalized other, and so that our interactions socially are highly influenced by symbolic interactions. That as individuals, we create common understandings through the use of language, which is a symbol system, and other symbolic symbols. So interactionists very much concentrate on social interactions that are taking place at the micro level of society. Another social science paradigm is that of structural functionalism. Some people call this structuralism, or some people call it functionalism, but better understood that social organizations are systems or organic wholes that have various components which serve different functions. This is associated with Emil Durkheim. He gave the example that crime and punishment reaffirm societal values. And so what we consider most important in society, we protect and we uphold through our legal and our criminal justice system. And by identifying criminal behavior or illegal behavior, we actually affirm our societal values. So crime and punishment actually function to uphold societal values. Other sociologists associated with structuralism and functionalism are Anthony Giddens, Talcott Parsons, and Nicholas Luhmann. In particular, Luhmann is associated with systems theory. Another set of social scientific paradigms come from the feminist and critical schools of thought. Nancy Hartsock, Dorothy Smith, Patricia Hill Collins, these are all feminist researchers who look at the social world from the standpoint of women. Researchers within these paradigms consider the specific subject locations, so the context, the history of these contexts. These are all important considerations in terms of feminist and critical paradigms. Not only is gender a particular subject position, but we look at subject positions based on ethnicity and race, class, ability, sexual orientation. All of these different subject locations are important when considering the particular standpoint of groups, but also the intersection of these standpoints. So one could have a particular gender and a particular ethnicity and occupy multiple subject positions that intersect. So those are a very brief description of some social scientific paradigms. I want you to do some looking on the web for yourself about the paradigms that I've just mentioned. And so you see a list there, and I'd like you to choose one from that list. I want you to look it up on the internet. Just do a quick and dirty search. And then no matter what you find, I want you to write a one-paragraph summary of the page that you look at. I want you to cite the source of the information from the internet, and then at least one of the theorists named in that source. It's just a one-paragraph summary. Post your work to the appropriate Blackboard discussion by midnight tonight.